The first drop of wine hit her collarbone before the laughter did. Glass snapped against marble and turned into glitter at her feet. A red stain spread across navy silk, fast and ugly, as if the dress had been cut open. Elena's hand jumped to her belly on instinct. The other tightened around her clutch until the hard edges bit into her palm. A woman near the bar said, "Oh no," like it was theater. Another voice answered, "Careful, she'll think this is a baby shower." They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. In rooms like this, cruelty traveled on undertones and eye contact. It moved through designer perfume and practiced smiles, and the idea that some people existed to be corrected. Elena swallowed and forced her shoulders to stay level. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. Her eyes stayed down because looking up felt like inviting more. She had learned that rule young. Don't give them your face. Don't give them your reaction. Don't give them anything they can carry home. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It came out automatically, like a prayer she didn't believe in. No one bent down to help her. No one warned her about the glass. A waiter froze with a tray of canapes as if his body had forgotten how to move. Even the string quartet seemed to hesitate, the music thinning for a beat before it continued, uncertain. Elena felt her baby shift, then kick once, hard, like a small protest inside her ribs. The Grand Astor Ballroom glittered in the way only Manhattan money could glitter. Chandeliers that looked like captured constellations, walls lined with oil paintings that had their own private insurance policies, tables dressed in white linen so crisp they felt ceremonial. Men in black tuxedos spoke in controlled voices about development projects, shipping routes, political favors, and donations that weren't really donations. Elena had agreed to come because Vincent asked. That was the truth of it. She didn't love these events. She didn't feel built for them. She was always aware of where her hands were, whether she was smiling at the right intensity, whether she was taking up too much oxygen. But Vincent cared about the Children's Medical Trust, and he cared about appearing in person. Sometimes influence had rules, and part of those rules was showing your face in places like this. She had chosen navy silk because it looked calm and expensive without shouting. She had styled her hair simply. She had put on small earrings, nothing that swung or caught light in a way that begged for attention. She wanted to be safe. She wanted to get through the night. 20 minutes earlier, Vincent had leaned down, kissed her forehead, and murmured that he had to take a call about a delay at the docks. He said it like it was a routine problem, like it would be handled in minutes. Then he disappeared through a side corridor, leaving Elena near the windows with the skyline spread behind her like an indifferent backdrop. She waited the way she always did, quietly, politely, not asking anyone to accommodate her presence. And still, they found her. Margaret Whitmore noticed her first. Elena recognized the type without being introduced. Margaret's hair was silver and sculpted into perfection. Her gown didn't cling. It floated, as if her body was too important for fabric to touch directly. Her smile belonged to a woman who had never had to explain herself to anyone. Margaret's gaze dropped to Elena's stomach and returned to Elena's face with a thin amusement. "Is she invited?" Margaret asked, not as a question, but as a verdict dressed in curiosity. Someone laughed behind a champagne flute. "She must be lost," another woman murmured, or someone's assistant. Margaret's friend, Sarah Chen, Elena later learned, tilted her head. If she's staff, she's dressed wrong. If she's a guest, well, that's worse. The words were neat, wrapped in humor, delivered with the ease of people who had never been punished for this kind of thing. Elena kept her eyes on the skyline. She told herself to breathe slowly. She told herself Vincent would be back any second. She also knew something these women didn't. The version of Vincent they saw was not the full one. At Gallus, he played the role they expected. He shook hands. He wrote checks. He spoke about charity. He listened to men brag about acquisitions and let them believe they were peers. But she had lived with him for 5 years. She had watched him handle a phone buzzing at midnight, his voice low and calm in a language she didn't always understand. She had watched a man twice his size stop mid-step when Vincent said his name. She had watched someone apologize to Vincent for being late, as if lateness were a moral crime. Vincent didn't posture. He didn't threaten. He didn't have to. His power didn't live in volume. It lived in the way the city quietly made room for him when he asked. Margaret Whitmore didn't know that. Margaret lived in a different kind of dominance, one built on inheritance and social proximity, and the confidence of people who believed the world was designed around them. She looked at Elena and saw a weak point, and weakness, in a room like this, invited games. The shove came quickly. Elena had been reaching for a small appetizer from a passing tray when Amanda Hale drifted into her path. Amanda's dress was a pale silver that caught chandelier light like knives. Her smile was too soft. Her eyes were too alert. She positioned herself, then stepped. The impact was not an accident. Elena felt the shoulder drive into her with intention. Her wine glass jerked. The liquid leapt. Crystal slipped from her fingers and smashed on marble, exploding into bright fragments. Red wine spilled across her dress in a violent bloom. The room went quiet for half a heartbeat. Then the laughter came. Not everyone. Not a roar. But enough. Enough to make Elena's face burn. Enough to tell her she had become the evening's entertainment. Amanda gasped theatrically, a hand flying to her chest. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see you there." Margaret's laugh cut through the murmurs. "Well, at least the color matches her shoes." Someone else added, "Maybe she should sit down. Wouldn't want her getting dizzy." Elena stood frozen. Her baby kicked again, urgent. The broken glass glittered at her feet like bait. She didn't move because she didn't know where it was safe to step. "I'm sorry," she whispered, because apologies were what she had used all her life as a shield. The shield did nothing. And then, the doors opened. It wasn't dramatic, just hinges and air pressure. But the room's sound changed immediately. Conversations died mid-word. The quartet faltered and stopped, bows hovering over strings like they'd been commanded. Heavy footsteps crossed the threshold. Every head turned. Vincent Rossetti entered the ballroom. He didn't rush. He didn't scan frantically. He didn't need to. His gaze landed on Elena and locked there. In that instant, Elena felt the air in her lungs change. Relief? Yes. Relief so sharp it almost hurt, but also something else. A tightening. A recognition that the night had just shifted into a different category. Vincent's face stayed controlled. The anger didn't show as a grimace. It showed as stillness. He moved toward her at an even pace. People parted without being asked. Men who had been laughing 10 seconds ago stared at the floor. Women who had been smirking adjusted their expressions into neutrality, like changing masks. Vincent reached Elena and removed his jacket with steady hands. He draped it around her shoulders, covering the wine stain, shielding her from the eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. Elena shook her head. Her throat felt tight. She didn't trust her voice. Vincent's hand settled at the base of her spine, firm, protective, a silent message. "Stand still. I've got you." Then he looked up. His gaze swept across the semicircle of guests, slow and deliberate. It didn't bounce. It catalogued. It recognized faces and filed them away. His eyes paused on the broken glass, then on Amanda, then on Margaret. "Good evening," Vincent said politely, as if he had arrived for cocktails. No one answered. The room held its breath. Margaret Whitmore cleared her throat, attempting to reclaim control with social charm. "Vincent, how lovely to see you. There's been a small accident." Vincent's eyes stayed on her. "Accident," he repeated, as if tasting the word. Amanda tried to step backward, but the crowd behind her shifted away, leaving her exposed in the open space like she'd been pushed into a spotlight. "It was just a bump," Amanda said quickly. "These things happen." Vincent's mouth curved into something that wasn't warmth. "These things happen," he echoed. His gaze dropped to the glass and the wine, then back up to the faces watching. "My wife was standing here," he said calmly, "carrying my child. Someone decided to make her the evening's entertainment." The sentence landed hard, not because it was loud, because it was clean. Vincent's hand stayed on Elena's back. He kept his posture relaxed. He didn't lean forward. He didn't clench his jaw. He didn't shout. That restraint made the room colder. He continued, conversational like he was discussing a business detail. "So, I'm curious. Who wants to explain to me how a pregnant woman ends up covered in wine while a room full of adults laughs?" Silence stretched. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. Someone's phone buzzed softly and was immediately muted. Margaret tried again. "Vincent, charity events can be crowded. People bump into one another. It isn't anyone's fault." Vincent nodded slowly. "No one's fault," he murmured. "Interesting." He reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. The movement was simple. Still, several faces changed. People understood phones meant connections, calls, consequences. "You know what else is interesting?" Vincent asked, still calm. "The hotel security footage." A ripple of fear traveled through the circle. "This hotel has excellent cameras," Vincent continued. "High definition, multiple angles. I imagine the last 10 minutes will be instructive." Amanda's voice cracked. I told you it was an accident. Vincent looked at her with genuine curiosity. Was it? He didn't press. He didn't accuse loudly. He simply asked the question and let her drown in the quiet. The room felt like it had turned into a courtroom with no judge visible, because the judge was standing right there. But perhaps I'm wrong, Vincent said, as if he could be persuaded. Perhaps this was truly accidental, a misunderstanding between strangers. Hope flickered in Margaret's eyes. She latched onto that opening like a lifeline. Vincent's gaze moved around the room. In that case, I'm sure everyone here will want to make amends. I'm sure the people who laughed will want to apologize. I'm sure those who watched without intervening will want to correct the moment. He was giving them a rope. Elena could feel it, a way to climb back to decency without being pushed. They didn't understand what they were being offered. Margaret's arrogance overrode her instinct. Vincent, you're overreacting, she said. Maybe if your wife were more accustomed to events like this, she wouldn't be so sensitive. The air changed. Vincent's hand tightened slightly against Elena's back, the only visible sign of reaction. More accustomed, he repeated softly. He looked around, taking in the chandeliers, the gowns, the marble, the paintings. Then he returned his eyes to Margaret. You know what fascinates me about rooms like this? He asked. How quickly manners collapse when people believe no one important is watching. He slid his phone back into his pocket without dialing. Then he took it out again and dialed. The sound of the call connecting was audible in the silence. Elena, Vincent said gently without looking away from the crowd. Stay right here. Then into the phone. Marcus. The name alone pulled attention. Vincent's assistant. The person who handled lists, logistics, and the kind of paperwork people pretended didn't run the world. I want the guest list for tonight, Vincent said, his voice still calm. Cross-reference with our interests. Contracts, permits, partnerships, every connection. He paused, listening. Yes, all of them. Another pause. Start with Whitmore Holdings. Margaret's face drained, not just pale, hollow. Around the circle, other people reacted as if someone had opened a trap door beneath them. Eyes widened, throats worked. People suddenly understood that this wasn't about a stain. Vincent ended the call and slid the phone away as casually as someone pocketing a pen. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. Vincent, surely we can discuss this like civilized people. Vincent tilted his head. Civilized, he repeated. He glanced at Elena just for a second, and Elena saw something in his eyes. Pride, yes, and tenderness, but also a hard decision already made. Let's define civilized, Vincent said, turning back. Civilized is not laughing while a pregnant woman stands in broken glass. Civilized is not testing whether someone belongs by humiliating them. Amanda's voice broke into a whisper. I didn't know who she was. Vincent looked at her. You didn't need to know. The words were quiet. They sliced anyway. My wife came here tonight, Vincent said, because I asked her to. She wore her best dress. She walked into this room prepared to smile at strangers and support a cause that helps children who don't get to choose their circumstances. He gestured toward Elena without moving his hand from her back. Instead, she got a lesson in what you call entertainment. A woman near the edge, Dr. Patricia Holbrook, a surgeon Elena recognized from a magazine cover, cleared her throat nervously. Vincent, perhaps we should move on. People make mistakes. Vincent's attention shifted to her, sharp and immediate. Dr. Holbrook, he said pleasantly. Mount Sinai, cardiac wing. Excellent work. Dr. Holbrook's face tightened. She nodded. Yes. Vincent's tone stayed polite. My foundation donated $2 million last year for your expansion. A few people inhaled as if a draft had entered the room. Yes, Dr. Holbrook said quietly. We're grateful. Vincent nodded. Gratitude is appropriate. He paused, then added, almost conversational. It's surprising how quickly gratitude becomes a business variable when values are unclear. Dr. Holbrook swallowed. Elena stood wrapped in Vincent's jacket, watching the room shift around him. She'd seen him handle difficult people before. She'd never seen him dismantle an entire room without raising his voice. Vincent turned slightly, addressing everyone again. I'm going to offer a second chance, he said. An opportunity for you to demonstrate what you claim to be. Hope flickered again in several faces, weak and desperate. My wife deserves an apology, Vincent said simply. Not because of my name, because she's a human being, and because cruelty isn't a mistake you get to dismiss as a social accident. Margaret's pride fought visibly against her survival instinct. The Whitmore name had opened doors for a century. Public apology to someone she considered beneath her felt like swallowing glass. But Vincent's stillness left no doubt that the alternative would be worse. "I apologize," Margaret said stiffly. The words came out like they hurt. "It was unfortunate. I regret any distress." Vincent's head tilted slightly. "You're apologizing to me." Margaret's jaw clenched. Vincent's gaze stayed steady. "Apologize to her." Margaret turned to Elena with effort. "I apologize for the incident." Vincent's voice stayed soft. "What incident?" Margaret's cheeks flushed. The question forced specificity, forced her to name the cruelty instead of hiding behind vague language. "For laughing when wine spilled on you," Margaret said, each word forced out. "For the comments, for making you feel unwelcome." Elena nodded once, accepting it without letting it into her heart. Then Amanda stepped forward. Tears streaked through her makeup. "I pushed you," she said to Elena. "I did it on purpose. It was cruel. I don't know why I did it. I'm sorry." Elena studied her. Amanda looked terrified, yes, but also exposed in a way Elena hadn't expected. Shame sat behind the fear. "I forgive you," Elena said quietly. The room reacted to Elena's composure like they hadn't expected it. They had expected hysteria, begging, drama. Instead, they got steadiness. Vincent squeezed Elena's hand once, not for forgiveness, for strength. One by one, more people stepped forward. Apologies poured out, some clumsy, some calculated. A judge's wife, a museum trustee, a developer whose company sponsored half the art in the room. Even a pair of hotel managers, trembling, apologized for not intervening sooner. With each apology, the air shifted further. The room's balance of power, once so stable, tilted. Vincent waited until the last voice fell silent. "Good," he said. He looked around like a teacher who had watched students complete only the first half of an exam. "Words are easy," he continued. "I'm more interested in behavior." He pulled out his phone again. This time, several people flinched outright, as if the gesture had become a weapon. "The Children's Medical Trust expected to raise $5 million tonight," Vincent said. "Between ticket sales and pledges, you're short." A few heads turned toward the donation table near the entrance. Vincent kept his eyes on the crowd. "That shortfall affects children who don't get to choose their circumstances." Elena's stomach tightened. She understood where this was going. "Tonight," Vincent said, "you showed me what your laughter costs." Margaret's voice cracked. "Vincent, you're not serious." Vincent didn't blink. "I'm always serious about protecting my family." He gestured toward the donation desk. "The evening isn't over. Those who participated, by action, laughter, or looking away, will close the gap." The crowd moved slowly at first, then with increasing urgency. People calculated quickly. How much would satisfy him? How much would keep their relationships intact? How much would buy distance from being the next example? Elena watched Manhattan's elite line up to write checks and authorize transfers. Some did it with stiff anger, others with frantic politeness, but they all did it. Within 20 minutes, the trust exceeded its goal by nearly $3 million. The event director rushed to the microphone, voice trembling, announcing the incredible success. The applause this time sounded louder, more eager, less celebration than relief. Vincent stepped back toward Elena. He looked at her, and his expression softened just slightly. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Elena nodded, exhaustion settling into her bones now that the adrenaline had started to fade. Vincent placed his hand on her lower back and guided her toward the exit. The crowd parted cleanly. No one dared block them. At the threshold, Vincent paused and looked back one final time. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," he said pleasantly, "and remember something simple." He let the pause hang long enough that even breathing sounded loud. "Decency isn't expensive," he finished. "Cruelty is." Then the doors closed behind them. In the marble lobby, the air felt colder, quieter, as if the building itself had been holding its breath with the ballroom and was now exhaling. Outside, Vincent's black sedan waited at the curb, engine purring. The driver opened the door without meeting Vincent's eyes. Elena slid into the leather seat, Vincent beside her. For a few blocks, the city moved past in streaks of light and shadow. "You didn't have to do that," Elena said finally. Vincent turned his head slightly. The fury of earlier had disappeared into something calmer and more dangerous. "Yes," he said. "I did. They'll resent you," Elena murmured. "They already did," Vincent replied, as if this had never mattered. His phone buzzed once, twice. He ignored it until it buzzed a third time. He glanced down. Marcus. Pulling full cross-ref now. Whitmore Holdings is deeply tied to 3 of our ongoing permitting streams. Vincent locked the screen. Elena's fingers traced the inside seam of Vincent's jacket sleeve. It still held his warmth and his cologne and something else. An edge she had never seen this clearly before. "Is it finished?" she asked. Vincent looked out the window, watching the city roll by. "It's beginning," he said. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, replaying the room, the laughter, the silence, the way faces changed when the doors opened. She thought about how quickly cruelty had surfaced in polite packaging, and she thought about how quickly that same packaging had collapsed under real consequences. When she opened her eyes, Vincent was looking at her, not checking his phone, not thinking about the docs, just watching her. "How do you feel?" he asked. Elena considered the question. She felt tired. She felt scraped raw. She felt the ache of humiliation still clinging to her skin like the wine stain had. But beneath it, something else had settled in, something solid. "I feel held," she said quietly, "like I'm not floating anymore." Vincent reached for her hand carefully, noticing the small cut on her palm from the glass. "You've never been floating," he said. "You just didn't know the ground was there." Elena turned her head to the window again and watched Manhattan pass by. Lights, bridges, faces blurred behind other cars. The city didn't care about anyone in particular, but Vincent did, and she understood, with a clarity that made her chest feel tight, that the room had misread her softness as weakness. Softness could be strong. Her phone buzzed with a message from a friend asking how the gala was going. Elena stared at it, then slid the phone away without answering. She didn't want to translate what had happened into casual words. Vincent's phone buzzed again. This time he looked. "Marcus, one more thing. Whitmore's internal expenses flagged. Looks like charity funds used to cover personal lifestyle costs. There's a paper trail." Vincent's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile. A decision. Elena watched him and felt her stomach dip. "What does that mean?" she asked. Vincent didn't look away from the window. "It means," he said, "some people think the rules are decorations." He paused. "And it means they'll learn the difference." Elena swallowed. Part of her wanted to tell him to let it go, to be above it, to keep their lives clean and quiet. But another part of her, older, sharper, remembered the laughter, remembered the way Margaret had looked at her belly like it was an offense. Consequences were not cruelty. Consequences were balance. Vincent turned to her. His voice softened again. "I'm not going to let them turn you into a story they tell for fun," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever." Elena leaned her head back against the seat. The baby shifted again. Calmer now. Outside the window, Manhattan kept shining like it always did, indifferent and expensive and beautiful in a way that could make people forget it was built on pressure. Inside the car, Elena finally breathed fully. Behind them, in the Grand Astor ballroom, Margaret Whitmore held a champagne glass that now felt heavier than before. She smiled at people with a stiffness she couldn't control. She laughed too quickly at jokes that weren't funny. She checked her phone every few seconds, scanning for any message that hinted at damage, because she had finally realized something she had never needed to consider before. She had mocked the wrong woman, and she had done it in front of the wrong man, and the city, quietly, had begun to move. Margaret Whitmore didn't sleep that night. She lay in a penthouse bedroom that had never felt small before, staring at a ceiling painted the color of expensive cream. Her husband's breathing beside her sounded steady, oblivious. Outside, the city hummed with late traffic and distant sirens and the soft, constant evidence that Manhattan never truly powered down. Margaret replayed the moment the ballroom doors opened. She replayed the way the room's temperature seemed to drop, not because of air conditioning, but because of recognition. She replayed Vincent Rossetti's face, controlled, unreadable, almost polite. Polite men were supposed to be safe. They were supposed to be predictable. Margaret had been building her life around predictable men for decades. Vincent Rossetti had been polite while he dismantled the room. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't threatened. He'd simply looked at people, named what they did, and made them pay for it in the only language they truly believed. Leverage. Margaret hated that she understood him. She hated that she had misread the situation because of a single thing. The woman. Elena Rossetti. Navy dress. 6 months pregnant. Quiet. Margaret had assumed quiet meant fragile. Margaret's phone vibrated on the nightstand at 2:14 a.m. She snatched it before it could buzz a second time. Unknown number. She stared at it for a moment, then answered. "Margaret Whitmore," she said, voice clipped. A man's voice replied, calm and professional. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm calling regarding a series of documents that require your attention." This is Marcus. Margaret's throat tightened. Marcus who? There was a pause, just long enough to feel like a hand closing around her wrist. Marcus Kaplan, the voice said. Mr. Rossetti's office. Margaret's heart beat once, hard. It's 2 a.m. Yes, Marcus said politely. Mr. Rossetti works unusual hours. Margaret sat up in bed, silk sheets pooling around her waist like water. What is this about? It's about clarity, Marcus said. Mr. Rossetti asked me to cross-reference tonight's guest list with our active and pending interests. We've identified several areas where Whitmore Holdings intersects with our network. Margaret's mouth went dry. Vincent can't. Marcus cut in smoothly. Mr. Rossetti can. Silence. Marcus continued. Tomorrow morning, 3 zoning approvals connected to Whitmore's East River project will face delays. The delays will not be permanent if you demonstrate cooperation. Margaret clenched her jaw. This is extortion. No, Marcus replied. This is the outcome of a choice you made publicly. Margaret felt heat rise in her face. It was a social misunderstanding. Marcus's voice didn't change. It was cruelty. Margaret's fingers tightened around the phone. What do you want? Marcus's tone softened slightly, almost kind. Mr. Rossetti wants assurance that you understand what happened, that you won't attempt retaliation through gossip, social channels, or professional pressure against Mrs. Rossetti. Margaret swallowed. And if I refuse? Marcus exhaled gently, as if disappointed by the question. Then the 3 delays become 15. Then lenders begin asking questions. Then partnerships grow hesitant. Then your board starts wondering why they smell risk. Margaret stared into the dark. Her husband shifted slightly in his sleep. He had no idea. He thought their name protected them from this kind of thing. Margaret spoke carefully. I understand. Good, Marcus replied. There's also an additional matter. Margaret's stomach dropped. What? Marcus's voice remained smooth. Whitmore Holdings has, for some time, used a specific charitable allocation structure to cover personal expenses. Mr. Rossetti's team noticed irregularities while cross-referencing donor activity. Margaret's lungs tightened. That's documented, Marcus said. There is a paper trail. Margaret's voice turned sharp. Is Vincent threatening to ruin me because of a spilled glass of wine? Marcus paused, then answered in a tone that sounded almost pitying. Ms. Whitmore, this is not about wine. It is about your instinct to humiliate a pregnant woman because she didn't match your preferred image of belonging. Margaret felt her face flush. I apologized. You apologized when it was required, Marcus said. That's not the same as regret. Margaret's hands trembled. What does he want? Marcus didn't hesitate. Mr. Rossetti wants the Children's Medical Trust to remain funded above target for the next 12 months. Margaret blinked. What? He wants your foundation, Marcus continued, to commit to monthly contributions, quietly, without headlines, without self-congratulation. He wants action to replace performance. Margaret stared at the wall. She could hear her own heartbeat. Marcus added, If you comply, mister. Rossetti has no interest in escalating beyond what's necessary. Margaret laughed once, bitterly. Necessary? Marcus's voice stayed calm. Your monthly contribution will begin next week. I'll send documents by 9 a.m. Margaret's throat tightened. And the irregularities? Marcus paused. Mr. Rossetti believes in proportional response. If you comply, he will not share what we found. If you don't, other institutions will notice. Eventually, the IRS will notice. Margaret closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt since childhood. Exposure. She whispered, Fine. Good, Marcus said. Sleep, Ms. Whitmore. Tomorrow we'll be busy. The line clicked dead. Margaret stared at the phone. Her hand shook. She set it down carefully, as if placing a fragile object on a ledge. She lay back down but couldn't close her eyes without seeing Elena's stained dress and the way Elena had whispered, I'm sorry, as if existing in that room required permission. Margaret hated Elena for making her feel this, and she hated herself more for understanding that Elena hadn't done anything at all. Across the city in Brooklyn, Elena stood in her bathroom in Vincent's oversized shirt, gently washing wine residue from her skin. The stain had been on the dress, but the feeling had been on her. Vincent leaned against the doorframe, watching her with quiet attention. You didn't need to make them give money, Elena said softly, hands moving under warm water. Vincent's voice came from behind her. They needed to repair what they revealed. Elena turned slightly, looking at him in the mirror. You turned it into something good. Vincent's eyes stayed on her reflection. I turned it into something balanced. Elena shut off the water and reached for a towel. Her hand trembled slightly, and she hated that it did. She hated that she could still hear the laughter in her head like a sound stuck in the walls. Vincent stepped forward and took the towel from her, drying her hands gently. Elena's voice came out quieter than she intended. I said I was sorry. Vincent's gaze sharpened, not at her, but at the memory. I know, I didn't mean it, Elena admitted. Vincent dried the inside of her wrist carefully, avoiding the small cut on her palm. You've spent your life learning how to survive rooms that don't deserve you. Elena swallowed. It felt like being back in school again. Like they could decide my worth with a look. Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. They can't. Elena's hand drifted to her belly. The baby moved. Gentle. I didn't want trouble, she said. Vincent leaned in and kissed her temple. Trouble found you. He guided her toward the bedroom, one hand steady on her lower back. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the dress draped over a chair. Navy fabric, now stained, ruined. I love that dress, she said quietly. Vincent's voice was calm. We'll replace it. Elena shook her head. It's not about the dress. Vincent sat beside her, close enough that his shoulder pressed lightly against hers. Tell me. Elena hesitated. She didn't want to sound dramatic. She didn't want to sound like she was asking him to carry her feelings the way she had asked him to carry her through the ballroom. But Vincent's stillness invited truth. I thought I could just blend in, she said. Like if I stayed quiet, they would ignore me. Vincent's expression didn't change, but his fingers curled slightly. Some people can't tolerate quiet. Elena's eyes burned. She blinked it away. They looked at me like I was a problem. Vincent's voice lowered. They looked at you like you were convenient. Elena turned toward him. Why do they do that? Vincent's answer came without hesitation. Because they've never been corrected. Elena stared at him. And you corrected them. Vincent's gaze stayed steady. I corrected the moment. Elena exhaled slowly. She looked down at her belly. What if she grows up in that world? She asked. What if she has to stand in rooms like that? Vincent's face softened. She'll never stand alone. Elena's throat tightened. Promise? Vincent placed a hand gently on her stomach, feeling the baby's movement beneath his palm. I don't promise, he said. I guarantee. Elena leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. The quiet of their bedroom felt unreal after the glittering cruelty of the ballroom. Vincent's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He didn't look. It buzzed again. He ignored it again. Elena lifted her head slightly. You should check, she said softly. Vincent's eyes stayed on her. Not yet. The phone buzzed a third time. Vincent exhaled once and picked it up. He read the message without expression. Then he locked the screen. Elena watched him. What is it? Vincent's voice was calm. Marcus found financial discrepancies tied to Whitmore. Elena froze. What does that mean? Vincent turned the phone face down on the table. It means she's been careless. Elena's stomach dipped. Are you going to do something? Vincent didn't answer right away. He looked at Elena as if weighing her comfort against his instincts. Elena, he said softly, I'm not interested in making examples for pleasure. Elena's voice trembled slightly. But you are going to make an example. Vincent's eyes stayed steady. If I don't, he said, they will tell themselves tonight was an anomaly, a fluke. They'll return to their habits, just more cautious about being seen. Elena looked away. She remembered the laughter, the fake concern, the way the room had turned her into an object. Then what? She asked quietly. Vincent's voice remained controlled. Then Whitmore becomes a reminder, not because I enjoy it, because it keeps the city's worst instincts in check. Elena swallowed. That scares me. Vincent nodded once. It should, he said. Power without conscience should always scare you. Elena looked back at him. Do you have conscience? She asked. Vincent didn't flinch. He didn't get defensive. His answer was simple. I have love, he said. And I have rules. Elena stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who brought her tea when she couldn't sleep with the man who had silenced a ballroom by walking through doors. Vincent brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You don't need to understand every part of my world, he said. You just need to know where you stand in it. Elena's voice came out small. Where do I stand? Vincent leaned closer. Above their opinions, he said quietly, and inside my protection. Elena closed her eyes briefly, letting the words settle. Outside, the city moved. Inside, Elena felt the night's sharpness begin to dull at the edges. But it wasn't gone, because humiliation doesn't vanish just because justice enters. It leaves residue. In the days that followed, that residue lingered in strange ways. At the grocery store, Elena flinched when a cart bumped hers. At a cafe, she found herself scanning faces for the shape of mockery. At home, she caught herself holding her belly with more vigilance than comfort, as if the world might reach for it again. Vincent noticed everything. He didn't comment every time. He didn't smother her with questions. He adjusted in small, practical ways. He walked closer to her in public. He kept his hand on her back. He arranged dinners with friends who didn't treat Elena like an ornament. He also worked. Elena didn't see the calls. She didn't hear most of the conversations, but she felt the city shifting subtly around them like a current. One afternoon, Elena received an envelope at their door. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note on thick paper. Mrs. Rossetti, I apologize again for my behavior at the gala. I acted cruelly and thoughtlessly. I have made a donation to the Children's Medical Trust in your name. I hope one day you can forget what happened. Amanda Hale. Elena stared at the note for a long time. She didn't know whether to feel satisfaction or sadness. Vincent read the note and handed it back without comment. That night, Elena attended a small luncheon hosted by the Trust. She almost didn't go. Her body tensed at the thought of being in another room full of people with polished smiles. But the director had called personally, voice warm, thanking her for being there. Elena went. When she arrived, the atmosphere was different, not because the people were kinder by nature, because they were aware now. Awareness changed behavior. They greeted her carefully. They held chairs. They made space. Elena smiled politely, but she also watched the edges of the room like an animal that had learned what predators looked like in expensive clothing. Then Margaret Whitmore walked in. Margaret's smile was thinner than usual. Her hair was still perfect, her posture still stiff with inherited confidence. But something had changed. There was a microscopic hesitation in her eyes, a calculation that wasn't there before. Margaret approached Elena directly, stopping at a distance that respected personal space. Mrs. Rossetti, she said. Elena's chest tightened. Margaret's lips pressed together briefly. I wanted to acknowledge again that my conduct that evening was unacceptable. Elena didn't answer immediately. Margaret continued, voice quiet. My foundation has committed to ongoing monthly contributions. I thought you should know. Elena's fingers tightened around her glass of water. Why are you telling me? Margaret's eyes flicked away for a second, then back. Because I want you to understand, she said slowly, that the humiliation you experienced didn't just disappear into the night. Elena studied her. Margaret's words sounded rehearsed, but there was something raw underneath them, the awareness of consequence. Elena's voice came out calm. Good, she said. Margaret's smile strained. Yes, she answered quietly. Good. She walked away. Elena stood there, realizing something with a strange clarity. Margaret Whitmore had lived her entire life without ever being forced to look directly at her own cruelty. Now she was. Elena didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired. Later, as Elena left the luncheon, she felt someone step beside her. Dr. Holbrook, the surgeon. I wanted to say, Dr. Holbrook murmured, that you handled that night with remarkable composure. Elena gave a small smile. I didn't feel composed. Dr. Holbrook nodded. Composure isn't feeling calm. It's not breaking while everyone watches. Elena looked down at her belly. Sometimes I think I only survived because I didn't have the energy to fight. Dr. Holbrook's eyes softened. Sometimes survival is the first form of strength. Elena walked to the car, Vincent waiting beside it as always, hand steady on her back as she sat. On the drive home, Elena stared out the window and thought about what her softness meant. Softness didn't stop cruelty, but softness also didn't make cruelty right. Vincent's world had pushed back for her that night, not because she begged, not because she performed, because someone loved her with enough force to correct an entire room. That truth was both comforting and unsettling. Elena leaned her head back and let the city blur. Vincent glanced at her. You're quiet, he observed. Elena didn't answer right away. Then she said, I'm trying to figure out if I'm grateful or scared. Vincent nodded. Both can be true. Elena looked at him. Do you ever worry about what happens when people stop fearing consequences? She asked. Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. Yes, he said. That's why consequences exist. Elena exhaled slowly. And what happens to us? She asked. Living in the shadow of your consequences. Vincent's gaze softened. You don't live in my shadow, he said. You live in my center. Elena stared at him, searching for the line between comfort and control. Vincent reached over and took her hand gently. I will never use fear against you, he said. as if reading her thoughts. I only use it against those who try to harm what I love. Elena squeezed his hand. Outside, Manhattan kept shining. Inside, Elena tried to let the weight in her chest settle into something she could carry, because she knew now. The night at the Grand Astor wasn't just an isolated moment. It was a marker, a dividing line. Before, Elena had believed that silence kept you safe. After, she understood something darker, something real. Silence only works when the people around you have decency. And decency, in rooms like that, was never guaranteed, only enforced. A week later, the city pretended the gala had been nothing more than a successful fundraiser. That was how Manhattan survived its own shame. It folded the ugly moments into the clean narrative and moved forward as if nothing had happened. Headlines praised the Children's Medical Trust for exceeding expectations. Social media circulated photos of smiling donors. People congratulated one another on generosity. No one posted the footage of Elena standing in broken glass. No one captioned the moment the room's laughter died. But the people who were there carried it anyway. You could see it in the way they looked at Vincent at the next event, in the way conversations stalled when his name entered the air, in the way they introduced their wives with unusual care. They remembered the sound of his footsteps. Elena remembered the sound too, not because she wanted to, because her body had archived it. She found herself replaying small details at odd times. The cold touch of wine against her skin, the sharp sparkle of glass at her feet, the fake gasp in Amanda's voice, the instinct to apologize, even when she hadn't done anything. The apology haunted her more than the stain. It wasn't weakness exactly. It was a habit, a survival reflex, a quiet agreement she'd made with the world long before she met Vincent. If I keep myself small, maybe I won't be punished for being present. That week, Elena woke up one morning and realized she had been holding her breath in her sleep. She sat up slowly, one hand on her belly, and stared at the pale light through the curtains. Vincent was already awake, dressed in dark slacks, buttoning a shirt. He moved quietly, controlled, like he never wasted motion. He noticed her expression immediately. "What?" he asked. Elena swallowed. "I keep hearing it," she said. "Hearing what?" "The laughter," she admitted. "Like it's stuck in the room with me." Vincent stepped closer and sat on the edge of the bed. "Tell me where." Elena touched her chest. "Here," she said. Like it did something. Vincent's gaze hardened, not at her, but at whoever had caused that sound. He reached for her hand and held it gently. "They don't get to keep space in you," he said. Elena's voice came out tight. "I don't know how to evict them." Vincent's thumb moved slowly across her knuckles. "We'll replace the memory," he said. Elena frowned slightly. "How?" Vincent looked at her. "With different rooms," he said. "Different people, different outcomes." Elena exhaled shakily. "That sounds like control." Vincent nodded once. "It is," he said. "Not over you, over the environment." Elena didn't answer. She stared at their bedroom, brownstone, quiet, warm, familiar, and tried to imagine herself walking into another ballroom without feeling that old instinct to apologize for existing. Vincent kissed her forehead and stood. "I have meetings," he said, "but you're coming with me this afternoon." Elena blinked. "Where?" Vincent's expression didn't shift. "To the trust." Elena's stomach tightened. "Why?" Vincent's tone remained calm. "Because the trust should associate your presence with respect, not spectacle." Elena hesitated. "Do I have a choice?" Vincent's gaze softened. "Always," he said. Elena looked away. She wanted to say no. She wanted to hide. But she also felt something else in her chest. A quiet anger that had arrived late. Not rage, not vengeance. Just the realization that she had allowed herself to be made small too many times. "Fine," Elena said. "I'll go." Vincent nodded. "Good." That afternoon, they drove to the Children's Medical Trust building. It wasn't glamorous. It smelled like disinfectant and coffee, and the kind of tired hope that lived in places where people fought for their children. The director greeted them at the entrance, eyes bright with gratitude and exhaustion. "Mr. Rossetti," she said warmly. Then she turned to Elena. "And Mrs. Rossetti, thank you for coming." Elena nodded politely. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. The director guided them through hallways lined with art made by children. Crooked houses, bright suns, stick figures holding hands. Elena's eyes lingered on one drawing of a girl holding a balloon. Vincent noticed. "Your daughter will draw better," he murmured. Elena gave a small smile. "Maybe," she whispered. They entered a conference room. A few board members sat at the table. People who looked like they had practiced empathy in front of mirrors. People who cared, but also understood money. They stood when Vincent entered. They shook his hand. They thanked him for his generosity. Then Vincent did something Elena didn't expect. He didn't sit at the head of the table. He pulled out a chair for Elena and positioned her beside him, not behind him, not off to the side. Elena sat slowly, aware of the attention. Vincent looked around the room. "I'm here," he said calmly, "to discuss sustaining the momentum from the gala, but I'm also here because my wife's presence was used as entertainment. That doesn't happen again." The room froze. Elena's cheeks warmed. The director's face tightened with discomfort and regret. "Of course not," she said quickly. "We are so sorry for what happened." Vincent nodded. "Apologies aren't the point," he replied. "Structure is." He looked at the board members. "I want a donor conduct policy," he said. "Clear, written, visible at events. Not because polite adults should need it, but because the lack of it gives people permission." One board member, a man with a nervous smile, cleared his throat. "We can draft something," he said cautiously. "But..." Vincent's gaze cut to him. Not hostile. Final. "You will," Vincent said. The man nodded quickly. Vincent continued. "I also want security protocols at events that prioritize guest safety, not optics. If someone is humiliated, staff intervene immediately." The director nodded, eyes wide. "Absolutely." Elena sat quietly, listening. She felt strange, like she was watching a part of Vincent she didn't see at home. Not the man who rubbed her feet, but the man who built walls around his family with policy and leverage. Vincent turned to Elena suddenly. "Do you have anything you want to add?" he asked. Elena blinked, caught off guard. All eyes shifted to her. Her instinct screamed to stay silent, to minimize, to let Vincent handle it. But something in her chest tightened. The delayed anger, the residue, the memory of saying "I'm sorry" when she shouldn't have. Elena swallowed and spoke. "I don't want sympathy," she said quietly. "I want the environment to be different for the next woman who walks into that room and feels outnumbered." The director's face softened. A board member nodded slowly. Elena continued, voice gaining steadiness. "Pregnancy shouldn't make you a target," she said, "and neither should quiet." The words landed in the room. Real, simple. Vincent's eyes flicked to her with something like pride. The meeting ended with commitments, drafts, timelines. Vincent made sure everything was recorded and assigned. He didn't accept vague promises. As they left the building, Elena felt the air in her lungs loosen slightly. Outside, Vincent's driver opened the car door. Elena slid in, and Vincent followed. On the drive home, Elena stared at the city passing by. "I didn't know you could do that," she said finally. Vincent glanced at her. "Do what?" "Turn it into policy," she replied. "Make it so it can't be dismissed as a moment." Vincent's mouth curved faintly. "Moments become patterns when no one corrects them," he said. "I correct patterns." Elena looked down at her belly. "Is that your job?" she asked softly. Vincent's gaze stayed on the road. "It became my job," he said. Elena hesitated. "And what about Margaret?" she asked. "What happens to her?" Vincent didn't answer immediately. He took out his phone, checked a message, then locked it again. Elena watched him. "Vincent." He exhaled once. "Margaret made her choice," he said. "Now she lives under scrutiny." Elena's stomach tightened. "Because of me?" Vincent's gaze cut to her, sharper than before. "Not because of you," he corrected. "Because of her." Elena nodded slowly, but the unease remained. She wasn't naive. She understood cause and effect, but she also understood that Vincent's world didn't always stop at balance. Sometimes balance tipped into domination. That night, Elena attended a small gathering at a friend's apartment. She almost canceled. The idea of standing in a room with people watching her made her skin itch, but she went anyway. The gathering was simple. Wine glasses, soft music, people talking normally. No chandeliers, no donors, no inherited hierarchy. Elena relaxed slightly. Then a woman she didn't know approached her with a cautious smile. "Elena?" she asked quietly. Elena turned. "Yes?" The woman hesitated. "I was at the gala," she said. I'm not proud of what I did." Elena's chest tightened. The woman continued quickly, eyes shiny. "I laughed," she admitted. "Not loudly, but I did, and I've been thinking about it ever since." Elena stared at her. The woman swallowed. "I wanted to tell you I'm sorry, not because I'm afraid of Vincent," she added hurriedly, "because I'm afraid of who I was in that moment." Elena felt something shift inside her. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. The moment had cracked something in people. Maybe not enough, maybe not fully, but it had left a mark. Elena nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. The woman exhaled, relief flooding her face. "I've been donating to the trust since," she added, "monthly." Elena's throat tightened. "Good," she said quietly. The woman left. Elena stood still for a moment, hand resting on her belly, feeling her daughter move. She realized then that the gala hadn't just exposed cruelty, it had exposed cowardice too. People laughed because it was safe. They apologized because it became unsafe. But some, at least a few, were shaken by the mirror Vincent had held up. When Elena returned home, Vincent was waiting in the living room with 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her without speaking. Elena sat beside him and stared into the steam. "Someone apologized tonight," she said softly. Vincent's expression didn't change. "Good," he said. Elena looked at him. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked, "of enforcing things?" Vincent's gaze stayed steady. "Yes," he replied, "but I get more tired of cleaning up what happens when I don't." Elena nodded slowly. She took a sip of tea and let the warmth spread through her chest. The city outside remained indifferent. It always would. But Elena understood now that indifference didn't mean helplessness. The next time someone looked at her belly with a smirk, Elena wouldn't whisper, "I'm sorry." She would meet their eyes, and if they still chose cruelty, she knew something else now too. They would pay for it. Not because she wanted revenge, because some people only respect reality when it costs them. And tonight, Elena had finally started learning how to stand inside that reality without shrinking.